And so I remember coming in one day, and the rule was no computers. And this employee was literally sitting right there. Dishes were piled up. The place was dirty. The whole line was a mess. And there's like so much stuff left to do. And they were just over there like, like looking at memes, just cruising Facebook. And literally, I remember as soon as they saw me, they just went white and went, and then they just tried to like close what they were doing. And I remember I just literally ripped the stool, like threw it across the room in the middle of the restaurant. Not the kind of thing you should do, right? They also quit the next day. So is there any surprise that I had a high turnover rate at that time?
Heck no. Who wants to work in that environment? Not me.
Well, exactly. Welcome back, everybody, to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Scott, multi-location owner for almost 20 years, and I've helped over 1,000 restaurant owners put more money in their bank account, have more freedom with their time, open more locations, and grow their sales. So what we're going to be talking about today is anger management tips for restaurant owners. And no one better to talk about this other than Dave Doyle, who's our client success director. He is the most angry and just stubborn person I've ever met. No, just kidding. That's me. But Dave is here because we've all had our shares of some scenarios. So why the hell are we talking about anger management for restaurant owners? Well, because restaurant owners are often stressed, and we often don't know how to handle that anger. And it comes out because our business is personal and our business is emotional, and we're under a lot of stress, and it comes out and in negative ways that unfortunately negatively impact our business, which can lead to turnover and can lead to a lot of stuff. So I'm going to take you down a little road into a long, long time ago in a restaurant far, far away, which actually isn't that far away. But let me take you back to the world of 2008, okay? I had first bought my restaurant in 2007 and thought I was going to make lots of money and have lots of free time. Oh boy, was I wrong. And I pretty much 3 months in was just like hemorrhaging money. Couldn't stop it. There's money going every which way. So I literally worked 80 plus hours a week because that was the only way to bring my labor down. I didn't know any other way. Sales were too low. So I just filled the gaps and did it myself. And in doing so, I was in overdraft in my bank account because I had a $10,000 like overdraft line of credit on my account. And I lived my first few years between $8,000 negative and $10,000 negative. And I knew that it would give me up to $11,000 negative if I got money in that day. It wouldn't bounce it. And it's funny, how many of you guys as restaurant owners right now know how much it costs for a return check or a return payment in NSF? If that is a problem, you should not know what that. I don't know what that is anymore. But if you do, that's a problem. Yeah, I used to know it too. I think it used to be like, it was originally $25 and it went up to like, it was almost $50, I think, at one point. Yeah. But anyway, it was annoying. It was annoying as shit. Anyway, I had a nice banker that refunded a few of them like every now and then because he probably just felt bad for me. I bribed him with food. Anyway, point is, I was under stress because I needed to like run to the bank so that my Cisco payment would clear. I need to run the bank so payroll would clear. I used to call my dad, "Hey man, like, can I just borrow like $1,000? Like I'll get it to you when my bank deposits hit on Tuesday." And so anyway, it was just, that was my life. And I was stressed and I was late on my rent for my apartment. And I had bounced my rent for the business. Like, we were so close to going under, like literally, like I want to say like a few $100s close. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's all that saved us. And so that's how things were. And so as you can imagine, the stress on me at that time, trying to make this business go, working 80 plus hours a week, not sleeping. I was also going to school part-time at the same time, which again, yeah, because my family wanted me to get my degree. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It hasn't helped me in my business career at all, but it was something that they wanted. And so I continued to do it because I was a good son. And so I did that. But it stressed me the hell out. I was just on the edge. And so there was a few things that happened that the stories that I don't like to share, but I will share them so all of you guys can laugh at me and make fun of me, but then also learn what I learned through that process. There's a couple instances. So here's what happened. There was this one time where I kid you not, I literally went home for a few hours in the evening and just to take a nap or whatever. And then 3 hours goes by and there was this one girl that called me. She worked for me and she worked with me for a couple of years, actually. I'm not going to give you her name, but she called me and she said, Andrew, this guy called. He was a delivery driver for the business next door. And he didn't have the company credit card and he needed gas to be able to do his runs. And so I gave him some money from the cash register for gas money because he said he would bring it back. Well, by the end of the night, it's been a couple hours and he hasn't come back yet. What do I do? And I was just like, you what? And then I literally drove, I like raced to the restaurant. And I remember I had my hat on. And I remember she was telling me the story. And I'm like, okay, how much did you give him? And I'm thinking like, hey, was it like $50? Was it like $60? $250. $250. Well, he's driving something. Well, I don't think he was driving anything at all, to be honest. No, it was just a story that was made up. But it was just some dude probably walked in. And anyway, point is, it was like $250. That was $250 more than I had. That was like our whole float at the time for that register. And I remember me just like taking off my hat and throwing it on the ground, literally stomping on it like a child.
That sounds like a cartoon.
And it does. It honestly probably looked that way. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, I'm pretty sure she quit the next day, but just because I verbally went up one side of her and down the other. And I remember my girlfriend being with me at the time and her just being scared to say anything on the entire ride home and just being like in fear of me, which is not something that you want as a boyfriend. And as a leader, you don't want your staff to be afraid to come to work because you're going to be yelled at all the time, right? And the thing was, this wasn't an isolated occurrence, right? This just happened to be a story that stuck with me, but there was another one as well. We also had a computer back before Uber Eats existed, back before DoorDash, back before all the other Grubhub and Skip the Dishes, and depending on where you're located in the world. But basically, we had a computer and people could order on our website for online orders and we would do our own deliveries. And it was actually a really new thing because this was in 2007. This is so far ahead of everything else, but we used to do online orders and delivery back then. And so the rule was that the staff weren't allowed to use the computer because it needed to be kept open on this program so the orders would come through. And sure enough, there was a stool there by the computer because I like paid bills on it and I did actual work, right? They didn't have computer work to do, right? They were frontline employees. They weren't submitting Cisco orders. I was doing that. And so I remember coming in one day and the rule was no computers. And this employee was literally sitting right there. Meanwhile, dishes were piled up. The place was dirty. The whole line was a mess. And there's like so much stuff left to do. And they were just over there like, bloop, 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 like looking at memes and just cruising Facebook and stuff like that. And literally, I remember as soon as they saw me, they just went white and went, and then they just tried to like close what they were doing and stuff like that. And I remember I just literally ripped the stool. They stood up and I ripped the stool and like threw it across the room and basically in the middle of the restaurant. Not the kind of thing you should do, right? They also quit the next day. You're seeing a pattern here with this. So that happened. Oh, another story too. When we actually, for those of you who don't know my story, I had 4 locations and then one closed and we relocated because the landlord, basically our lease ended and he wouldn't renew it. He gave it to our neighbor who was willing to pay more and more than we could afford. So anyway, this one closed and that was the one that I had worked at for like 10 years, like blood, sweat, and tears. It was tough. So check your lease agreements because if you don't have a lease, you don't have a business as a restaurant. So anyway, what happened was as we were closing this out, I remember I had this communication book that was there. And the communication book on the very front of it had a big smiley and said, here's where all of our team communications go, smiley face. And then you open it up and the first one was a haiku that I had written. And do you remember this one? So, because I've told the story before,
but I don't know. But just with the topic of conversation, I'm just anxious waiting to hear this.
So basically what had happened one day is someone had baked cookies and they had burnt them all. And cookies were only like 25 cents a piece, so it was probably like $4 or $5. But again, $4 or $5 is more than I had, right? I was bouncing checks. We were so close to going out of business. So I came in and someone had burnt these cookies, $5 worth of cookies. And so I came in, I was livid. I probably threw the tray into the garbage, blah, 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 blah. And then I went on the computer, again, the computer that we had issues with. But I literally went there and typed out a haiku. The haiku read, "Do not make cookies unless you've been trained. Do not make cookies unless you've been trained. All you're doing is burning them and wasting my money. Do not make cookies unless you've been trained." That was the haiku. And I posted that for every staff member to read. And because this person tried to make cookies and had not been trained on how long to cook them for and stuff like that, and then wasted money. And so that was my communication to everybody. And those were regular occurrences. So is there any surprise that I had a high turnover rate at that time?
Heck no.
Right? Because
who wants to work in that environment? Not me.
Oh, exactly. And I'm sure some people are listening to this and going, "Oh, that's nothing." but that was life. And we had staff who, again, just chose not to work there. The average person that worked with me lasted less than 3 months. They got in, saw what things were like, worked until they could find another job, and got the hell out. Right? And then I had to repeat the process all over again. And I had to go and I just had to do it again and again and again. It wasted training dollars and it wasted more labor cost. And it was just frustrating. Right? And so I have had stories like this. And what I had to learn is the type of environment that I'm creating in my business the type of environment that's going to allow the people in the business to flourish, for them to perform well. And another thing too, is the type of environment that we create one where a top performer would want to stay.
Yeah, that's key.
Right? So that's the thing. Because if you have someone who has self-esteem and could like a good sense of self and knows that they are valuable and can work other places, they're not going to stick around and be treated like that. That's not what they're going to do.
When they see the boss throwing chairs and making clever, not clever haikus, they're just going to go. Yeah. They're just going to leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's not like I was the only place that was hiring. So it was a thing. And so here are some of the things that I've found that I needed to do. And what I found to be really, really helpful for me is, number one, take a breath. Right? So I had to practice this, because I had to practice disassociating myself from the stuff that was happening. So, because the thing is, the thoughts in your head and how you react and all of that, we all think it just happens like really, really quickly, but it doesn't have to. We think we might react in a certain way normally, but because we haven't really worked like training a muscle, you have to train to do things differently. We just do it because that's what we've always done, but you can change it and you can think about how to respond to a situation. You don't have to do something immediately. So what I started doing is I would just take a breath and I would not respond right away. And I would be like, but probably not that pronounced.
And that wasn't intimidating to the team that you're standing in front of either.
Well, no. So what I would do is I would just practice it, but I wouldn't do like a big breath like that. I would just be like, okay. And I would just give myself space. I just breathe for a second. Okay. And if it was something really frustrating, I would then say, okay, guys, I'm going to be back in a minute. And I would literally go into my office or wherever, whatever the case, I would just go separate myself and I would breathe, or I would like punch the air, whatever you want to do. I don't care. But do it away from the people that you employ and where you can handle your own shit before then you take your shit out on them. So, and even if it was their fault, let me ask you this, because here's the ultimate thing that I had to understand is that we want to act in a certain way. Like, how many times has someone screwed you over and you want to get back at them because you're mad, right? I want to go do something. You want all of that. But let me ask you, right? What action is going to have the best outcome in this scenario? Is it going to be that? Probably not, right? And so I always had to ask myself, what is the outcome that I am looking for? So that was like literally a statement or a question that I wrote down and attached to my wall. What outcome am I looking for here? Because once you start thinking of what to do, right, and how it will have different outcomes, you can then choose how you act. And so the first thing I had to do, though, was separate myself and give myself space. So I would breathe, and then I would remove myself if I needed to, and give myself a few minutes. And then I would say, okay, so this thing happened, right? And so here is an example of where I handled it a little bit better. So here's another story for you. So we were that same location that was closing down. It was like the last day of operation or something like that. Or no, I think we had 2 or 3 days to go. And our chef's base, or basically like our meat cooler, which is underneath the grill, it basically went on the fritz. And I ordered a new part, but it didn't make sense to get it installed right away because it was just going to be in storage for 6 months. I'm like, I'll just get it installed when we're ready to open up for the next one because I didn't want to spend however much money or whatever. And so we just decided to put that off. And so what happened was I got notified when it went out and was over temp. And then I told the manager that was there, I'm like, hey, I just go and empty it all, make sure it's empty and just unplug it, right? And so she did that. And then the next morning, the opener called me and said, hey, Andrew, the temp of the meat in the chef space it's all over. It's way above temp. It's at room temperature right now. And I was like, oh, no, you must be thinking of the wrong thing because the chef space is empty. And she's like, no, it's not. It's full. It is full of everything. And we're talking like $700-$800 for the product here. And so I'm like, what do you mean it's full? And she's like, no, I just came in and I was doing my temp checks and it's over and it's full. And I'm like, okay, thank you for letting me know. And so again, I was just internally seething at this point, but I was just like, okay, thank you. And I hung up the phone. I wanted to throw the phone, to be specific, but I did not. I set it down. And then I happened to be standing with that same manager that worked the night before, standing right there when I got the call. And she overheard it. And she looked at me with dread in her eyes. And I just said, I need a minute. And so I went and I took a minute. And because the thing was, here's the thing, right? So acting the way that I wanted to from an emotional level, let's think of the outcomes of that. I could have thrown the phone, which means I would have had to buy a new phone. Right? I could have then scared the manager who was there, which I had invested a year and a half into training and grooming, right? So that would take tens of thousands of dollars to replace and to do that. If I could yell at her up one side and down the other, and she would feel terrible and probably cry and probably leave, and then I would have to replace her. I could post rants on Facebook. I could tell all the staff about how never to leave meat in something that was off and blah, 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 blah. I could have probably done all those things. Which one of those would have given me the $700 back?
Exactly zero.
None of them, right? So you cannot change the past. And so in that moment, I had to say, what outcome am I looking for? And so it is that point when I said, okay, I am looking for us to learn from this situation. I am looking for us to fix what happened, because obviously we don't want to serve spoiled meat to guests, so we have to throw it all out. So I need to do that. But the next thing is I need to make sure that this does not happen again, and so that we learn the lesson, but we need to do it in such a way that we don't have any unnecessary effects that happen after that are negative, right? And so I may have went back and I might have asked the question, what do we need to do differently so this doesn't happen again? Which is a great question, which is a coaching question. It's a learning question to ask the manager. I may have said it with a little bit of frustration in my voice still. I might have said it like, so what do we need to do so this doesn't happen again? But in the comparison of me throwing the phone and probably yelling and screaming, blah, 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 acting like a child, that was significantly better. So I'm not going to say that was the perfect way to handle it. I'm going to say that it was way better than it would have been previously, because she did not quit. She stayed with us and was a great manager. What ended up happening was the night before, she had actually been training someone, and then part of on the checklist, which we have very detailed, says make sure everything is full in that thing. And so after she'd went to do something else, and then the employee, trying to be a good employee, saw that it was empty and filled it all up with brand new stuff. Again, it was no one's fault necessarily, right? Because she had done what I asked, unplugged it, emptied it, but then someone else came right behind and filled it back up. And she wasn't watching the person's every move, but everyone was trying to do the right thing, and we still failed. And it cost me $700 or whatever the case was. So point is, that was a mistake. But I will also tell you that I have made way more mistakes since then, worth way more money than that, tens of thousands of dollars. But the lessons I learned from that, well, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still have the inclination. And the thing is, you're not going to change your whole behavior. You're not going to stop these feelings from coming up and feeling like that. But you can change what you actually do. You can't change how you feel, because that's more instinctual. But you can change, so you can't change how you feel, but you can change what you do. Right? Because you have a choice. Hey, quick break in today's episode. Do you want to know exactly what's holding your restaurant back from higher profits and more freedom? I'm offering a limited number of free 15-minute restaurant assessments this week, where my team will personally pinpoint how to get you more profitability and more freedom with your time and map out the steps you need to get there. Simply tap the book a call link in the description below, and we'll see you soon.
So that's actually one of the things I talk about a lot. And I start with happiness. So happiness is a choice, and how you go about your day is absolutely a choice. But the interesting thing about all that, with all of the stories you told and the improvement and the evolution of how you respond instead of react is huge. What I'm personally curious about is where did you get to the point where you were actually able to think in the heat of the moment? Because that literally is the first step. Because before, you would immediately react without any thought whatsoever. But then all of a sudden, the difference was shit would hit the fan, and you would have something in your mind. You would have a block that would stop you from spewing and make you take a moment and take a breath and decide that you needed to walk away and take more than just a breath. And that is very, very high level thinking and high level emotional intelligence to get to that point. So that right there is probably one of the most difficult things to get to, because it's that initial not thinking and reacting to actually being able to think in that state and deciding how to respond. There's a huge difference. Do you have any sense of?
Well, and I was thinking about this, and I'm like,
what was that made that change?
I mean, I think just because the thing is, I realized one day, and kind of how I realized it is one day I don't know whether someone asked me or whether I just asked myself this question. I probably asked myself, like, am I the problem? Like, it probably came up to someone, or someone said the way in which you react to things has these detrimental effects on others, right? And so once I got that feedback, I was like, well, what do I do with it? And I think it was along the coaching journey that I started, because I've had coaches for 10 plus years now, just in my own personal coaching to make me better. And everybody has coaches, by the way. Like Tiger Woods still has a coach, right? Like everybody does. It's part of how they get better and then stay better, because it's someone that can help point out the things that you might be missing. And so one of those things that came up was how I reacted to things. And so what happened is, every time they would ask me, like, okay, so tell me about this situation where you reacted poorly. And I would go back and they would ask me after, like, okay, like, what should you have done differently? Oh, well, instead of that, I should have done that. Okay, so what are you going to do next time? And the whole key was just, for me, every time I would get in that space, I just had to learn. And sometimes I was able to recognize faster of what I should have done. I should have paused. I should have stopped, to eventually to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to stop and I need to pause. And then it got to a point eventually where I could start to notice the precursors of what would make me angry, right? And so one of the precursors for me was that I will notice a tension in my shoulders. I will notice like all of a sudden I will start getting tight and tight and tight. And I notice my vision will kind of narrow a little bit. And so I notice these physical things that start to happen. And when those happen, I'm like, okay, like I'm like kind of like that teapot they used to have, like you could boil water with it, you put it on the stove, like old school. Like, and it would like start to like whistle like a little bit, like, and then it would eventually make the big whistle noise. So like you want to start where that like little whistling starts, right? So that you can immediately remove it before it gets to a full boil, because I knew that in situations there were certain triggers that I had that if I didn't remove myself, I would then be in a situation which I would feel out of control, or I would do something in reaction that wouldn't be the right thing to do. And I would feel like I was out of control at that point in time. So I had to then learn, okay, when I start to feel these things, I know I'm getting anxious, I know I'm getting frustrated or whatever it is, I just need to take a breath and I need to step back. And so that's one of the things that I learned. Now, it might manifest differently for each of you guys, but think about, okay, what are the things that normally frustrate you? What are those things that, what do you kind of notice right before that happens? Are there any signs? Let's just start thinking about that. And once you notice it, then you can be like, okay, I just need to breathe. I need to bring my emotion down a little bit. And then you're able to think logically, because you cannot think logically when you are in an emotional state.
Yep.
That's really important to understand that. So first you need to bring your emotions down. And so, and again, if you're listening to this, you might not, like your default might not be anger. Maybe for some people it's crying. That might be your emotional thing, right? It could be different for everybody. Some people could withdraw and disassociate. Like, there's a bunch of different things that people do and how they handle these types of situations. For me, it was anger. So, but learning what those things are that happen in advance will help prepare you for that. And then once you separate yourself and you breathe and you can regulate your own emotions in that way, then you can choose what course of action to take, which is the most important part.
It really is that simple in theory. It's obviously much more difficult to apply and do, because when you're in emotion, you're in emotion. But what, for me, the key part of your entire story and all those little stories and the change that happened was because, number one, you were open to it. You were open to change because you recognized that something could be better, even though you had no idea what that might be. And probably where you got the help was, like you said, from your coach, from somebody else that was in a position to help you recognize and help you deal with and give you the tools and resources and knowledge to be able to act on that. And it's kind of interesting because the example that you gave, like even just recognizing and taking the time to breathe or step back or walk away from the issue, that's not abnormal. In fact, in kids' sports, that is very normal. So my kids grew up playing hockey, and I coached for several years throughout that. And there's always the 24-hour rule for parents, because it doesn't matter what team sport your kids are involved in, or even individual sports, right? Something will happen where you, as a parent, see something that you want your kid to have better, meaning the coach makes a decision, or something happens on the ice with the referee and you get all emotional and crazy, and the coach makes a call to sit your kid for a few shifts because they need to learn a lesson, or they're not getting the same amount of playing time as other kids or whatever. And of course, you as a parent in the stands can see everything perfectly, and you're not biased in any way, shape, or form about your kid versus every other person on the field or on the ice or on the whatever, right? But what happens is usually there's an organizational structure. So you have the coaching team, and then you have a parent liaison in between the coaching staff and the parent group. So the parent group then, if they have a complaint after a game, because now the parent is seething, is like, oh, why didn't my kid get enough playing time? They have to go through the parent liaison in order to be able to talk to the coach. And the parent liaison's job is to say, well, we need to observe the 24-hour rule. So go home, think about it, write out what your challenges are, and get a hold of me in 24 hours, and whatever you need to talk about with the coach, then we will absolutely set an appointment and everything will be fine. We'll talk through it and we'll make this happen. 9 times out of 10, if the parent observed the 24-hour rule, by the time 24 hours rolls around, they were over it, done, and actually came to their own conclusion more logically about what actually happened and didn't have the same beef that they had 24 hours before. And so this is exactly the same version. It's just compressed time frame. Instead of 24 hours, you might be taking 24 seconds to breathe and come at the thing in front of you in a whole new light, in a whole new space. And it's not because you're not emotional anymore. It's because you now have awareness, self-awareness of your own emotional state, and can respond and act the way you want to act because you want to, because you've recognized the issue and you're trying to work it. So all of these things need to happen in order to make that kind of drastic change in your mindset and your emotional state, because the emotions, like you said, are always going to happen. You're not as trying to escape the emotion or try to say negative emotions are evil and bad and I'm going to stuff it down. No, it's recognizing that I'm in this state and then deciding what to do with that state.
Yep.
And the breath is huge. And scientifically and biologically, when you're bringing oxygen to the brain, especially on purpose and especially in a deeper way, letting it in, letting it out, taking the time to do that, you're oxygenating your brain and your entire nervous system, and it's allowing you to be smarter. Because what is it? We have a coach that we work with, and she says, when you're in an emotional state, a negative emotional state especially, you just become stupid.
Basically. Yeah,
right?
because you're then going on your baser instincts, right? Think of like caveman brain or cavewoman brain, whatever. You're kind of going off that, whereas mostly like, okay, is something trying to kill me? Like pretty much. So we often just react in fear, and they had a very limited way back in that time of dealing with complex emotions. So us now, most of the time we don't have tigers trying to kill us, right? But our brain can still be wired in that way. So we just have to understand that. And so when we're emotionally, we're just thinking from our baser instincts and not actually thinking logically about it. And this is just a very common thing. And another reason why breathing is so important, and everybody probably thinks we're crazy as we're talking about breathing, but how important it is, once you recognize it, you will understand it, because you also then concentrate on breathing in and breathing out, which forces you to concentrate on that instead of whatever it is that's actually making you feel the way that you feel, right? And so it just is able to focus on something else. Yeah, you're just resetting yourself. It's kind of like you're doing a reboot on your router. Whenever things get all haywire with your internet, you unplug it, plug it back in, and okay, then it's good to go. So kind of like that. Like just focusing on breathing for 10 seconds or whatnot is kind of like that for us. So very, very important. And also understanding another thing too is some responses don't have to be given right away. You don't necessarily have to respond right away. Because I remember I had this customer complaint, and I was always a big proponent on responding right away and doing it immediately and stuff like that. But I will say that in some cases, because when we get customer complaints, because we're personal, like we take our business seriously and personally, and we want to like be like, well, that didn't happen, and they're full of crap, and then they're probably just wanting free food. Like we come up with all this stuff. And so I always would ask, okay, so what can we learn from this instance? Let's investigate it. Did something happen that we could have done better? Is there some truth to what they're saying? Or is there at least, because again, no matter what, truth or not, it's their perception versus your perception. So it's still, their perception is still valid for them, right? Like the saying puppy love, well, puppy love is still real to the puppy, right? So their perception is still valid to them. And so it's important for us to understand that. And just knowing that, okay, is there some validity to what they're saying? Is there some things that we could have done better? And now, once we've figured that out, then we have to go and approach that conversation. What is the outcome that I'm looking for? But is the outcome of like slamming them down with insults online and stuff like that, there's potential negative consequences to doing that, right? People will then form their beliefs about you and your business based on how you respond to it, right? And so we have to say, what is the outcome that I'm looking for? If it is to make the customer happy, that's going to respond in a certain way. If it's to make them angry and tell everyone that they hate you and never visit there again, that is another course of action you can take, right? But we want to be able to choose which one of those we take, because that is our responsibility as a business owner to make the right decisions. Okay.
And part of what you're saying though too is sometimes the reaction isn't just emotional, it's lack of information or lack of knowledge, right? So if you get, again, a customer complaint or an issue in front of you, sometimes we react and go into solution mode before we even have all of the information. So that's another point where it's very important to take a bit of time, because even though we feel like it needs to be dealt with immediately doesn't necessarily mean that nanosecond. It could mean an hour later, and an hour later changes everything about how it's dealt with, and 100 times better. But that hour isn't going to make or break or change the scenario that happened, right? It's like, listen, if I deal with this in this minute or an hour from now, is it really going to change anything? Absolutely not. So let's take the hour and get 3 sides to the story, not just 2, right? So it's like, okay, we got that complaint. All right, let me talk to the team that was there when this happened. Let me get all their sides of the story individually, get that information, reassess what the guest might have said. And then I'm actually going to critically think through some of that, and I'm going to put the truth somewhere in the middle. And
exactly.
Right. And that's the 3rd side of the story. And then I'm like, okay, now that I have that information, how am I going to respond to this appropriately?
Yep.
And that hour will make a huge difference on the outcome that you're trying to achieve versus trying to deal with it in the first 60 seconds.
100%. Yep. So if you guys get frustrated sometimes as restaurant owners, that is totally normal. But what is not normal is handling it in a negative way, because that should never be normal. So that's why, as restaurant owners, I want to call you to be better, to run your business differently. You've probably worked in environments or seen bosses that were angry all the time and everyone was miserable and they hated their lives. And you probably said, I never want to be like that. Now you probably understand the stresses that they were under, but you still have a choice. And so if you want to create a better business that's run differently, you get to choose to do that. And it starts with taking the first step. So Dave, thank you for being here. I had a lot of fun rehashing some of my worst moments of my life. So thank you for that. But I hope
being vulnerable and sharing all of that, Andrew. Now we're all thinking about haikus and throwing chairs.
Yes. So I hope that you guys don't repeat the situations that I have, but hopefully you do take the steps to make things better in the future. So guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the other side.